Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, she likes it there a lot.
Let's open class this morning with the word of prayer. Let's bow. Gracious and loving God, throughout the course of this class, we've learned how much migration is a part of human history, and how much it's a part of our faith history, our spiritual ancestors. So much migration, immigration, emigration, for so many reasons. Grant that today we might learn more about the challenges faced by immigrants today in our own country. Give us hearts of compassion and acceptance and concern about those who come to our country who, from different places and cultures, and who may look different than we do. Help us to become, we've always been a welcoming congregation, but help us just to grow in that kind of welcome. For we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
So this is the final session in our course, Immigration and the Bible, and we have a special guest speaker, Chuck Olcese.
Good job.
And without further ado, I'm going to let him introduce himself
Okay.
and tell you about his background, and he has
Okay.
a presentation. So, Chuck, welcome.
Good.
Glad you're
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Is this, yeah, okay, it's on.
Yeah.
I've been told I should use this. Yeah, Chuck Olcese, I retired about 4 years ago from the University of Kansas. I was the director for international services there. So we took care of all the international students, all the international scholars. We did not do the study abroad. That was a kind of a sister office that we worked with. But so we took care of all the incoming people coming to KU. I've been in that career, that field, for about 30 years. I was at KU for about 8 years before I retired. So that experience is what kind of opened my eyes to the issues that we face with immigration in the world today, particularly in the United States. One of the jobs we had was taking care of all the immigration details for the students, making sure they stayed legal, they had permission to work, do all those things. And so I became very aware of all the rules that govern people coming to the United States. During the 2016 election, if you can remember that election, there were a number of us who became very concerned, and probably some of you, with the kind of rhetoric that was being used during that election, particularly regarding immigrants. And so we kind of got a few people together. We had a person I'm from the Episcopal Church here in town, and so the Episcopal Church had an office in Wichita that was doing refugee resettlement. And we asked her to come up and talk to us about what were the issues and what did we need to know, what could we do. And we just put the word out to different people we knew from many different churches, non-church people. And we had 60 people show up that night. So we thought, okay, this is touching a nerve. Some people are really concerned about this, and obviously it was in the news. And so we decided to start an organization. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. But we've been going on with that since that time. And just recently, a year ago, we started a new nonprofit specifically about resettling refugees here in Lawrence. And I'll tell you a little bit about the specifics of how that came about and what those opportunities are as we get going. But that's kind of me in a nutshell. I've been around international people all my adult life, pretty much, and find it very satisfying. One thing I like to say is that one thing I learned in my career is that difference is a very scary thing. And encountering people who are different can be really off-putting, whether we're very open to it or not. You have to make so many adjustments to it, and you constantly are thinking the whole time, am I doing the right thing? How do I do this? What do I have to say in this situation? And so it's just more comfortable not to do that, right? It's more comfortable to avoid that. to stay among the people you know, who you can be familiar with. But if you can get to meet somebody who's different and get to know them, it will change your life forever, because you will enter that experience very different the next time you meet somebody. And so that's what I spent my career doing, is just trying to get Americans to meet international students, to spend time with them, do things with them, and become familiar with them and make those adjustments and open themselves up to that idea. Let me get going with the presentation. I'm going to need somebody to advance slides for me. If you can do that, that would be great. Okay, so the organization we started when we began in 2017, not 1970, was called LIRIM, Lawrence Interfaith Refugee and Immigrant Ministry. And when we started that organization, we didn't know what we were going to do. We were really in a fact-finding mission. But we were told that night when we started it from the woman from the Episcopal Migration Ministry office in Wichita that they would probably never resettle anybody in Lawrence because it lacked the three main things they needed. There were not plentiful jobs. There was not affordable housing, and there was no identified immigrant community in Lawrence. And so most likely they would be resettling people in Wichita, and there's a number of agencies in the Kansas City area. That's where people were going, and they were finding their communities, and they were doing that. And we thought, that's fine. We don't have to resettle someone in Lawrence. We just want to be involved in the process of helping with this. So we organized ourselves around three areas. One was advocacy. So what can we do to change policy regarding immigration? One was assistance. What can we do to help those who are coming, whether they're in Wichita or Kansas City, or should they come to Lawrence? Or what kind of an immigrant community do we have in Lawrence? And awareness. What can we do to help people become aware of what the issues are, what they can do, how they can be involved, and that they don't have to be afraid of difference. And so we worked on that for a number of years. We used to have, before COVID, we had several meetings, we had speakers, we had book readings, we did films on immigration and refugees, and just were trying to get the word out to everybody about this. Well, COVID hit, it was kind of a difficult patch for us because we couldn't get people together, and Zoom calls were very impersonal and only a few people would show up, and we just didn't get the enthusiasm, you know. So we kind of laid low at that time. But one thing we did do before COVID was to start doing programs with Centro Hispano, which is the main Latino agency here in Lawrence. Takes care of many immigrants who are coming in, some documented, some non-documented, and does mostly things for families. So we started doing things to help support them, raising money for certain campaigns they would have, things like that. And then we combined with them to start a program to start a scholarship for DACA students. I don't know if you know of that term. DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which means children who came here at a very early age with their parents, undocumented, the whole family coming undocumented. And so they have grown up here in the United States. Many of them, most of their life right here in Lawrence, have known no other home, really. If they were to be deported back to Mexico or El Salvador, wherever they're coming from, they would know nobody there. They would know nothing culturally there. This is their home. And so during the Obama administration, he tried to get something through Congress. It didn't happen, and so he just gave a presidential order starting a DACA program, which students could sign up for or kids could sign up for if they met these criteria They'd been here for so long, they'd come before the age of 16, they were, doing all these things, staying in school, all that. They could sign up for this, and they would get permission to work, relief from any kind of deportation, and in some cases, the ability to attend school, public schools, and such. Now, in Kansas, they could already do that. They could attend school in Kansas. So we started this scholarship for those who wanted to go on to college. And we started selling tamales. Erin was telling me she bought tamales from us a few years ago. So before COVID, we would get these people together, we'd make tamales. It was a wonderful community building activity. And we would raise money, a few $1,000s, and we would give $500 scholarships, and these kids were just so grateful for it. We've stopped making tamales because of COVID, and we found out during COVID that while people really liked the tamales, what they really wanted to do is support these students. And if we just asked them, they would give us the money. They didn't have to have tamales for it. And so we stopped making tamales and just started asking for money, and it's going really well. So we've had that going. Okay, so that was our program. Now, a year ago, actually, we started a new nonprofit called AIR, Assistance for Immigrants and Refugees. LIRM was never really a nonprofit. It was really more of a communication network of people about issues that we could bring up and organize ourselves to do things about. But we weren't raising money. We were for Centro Hispano. There was always some other place people could give the money to. We were just more the voice for it. But, and I'll tell you why we created AIR in a minute, but this is an organization that we are 501c3. We can raise money, and the specific purpose of this group is to support, to bring in, to private sponsor refugees to live in Lawrence. Okay, next. So a few definitions you'll need to know, and maybe you've talked about these already, I'm not sure in your class, but there are definitions as to what's a refugee and what's not a refugee. And a refugee, when I first started this, I thought refugees were anybody coming to the United States in distress. I should have known better because I knew immigration rules were really tight. But there's a definition for refugee, and it is this: a person who has been forced to leave their country in order to escape war, persecution, or natural disaster. And that definition is given to us by an organization called UNHCR, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. And really all refugee work worldwide is kind of coordinated through that organization. They give those definitions, they get people into the pipeline of being qualified as a refugee. They work with countries like the United States who have said, we'll take refugees coming through that you're vetting through that, and then the United States places them. TPS may be a thing you've heard, particularly around Haitians currently, but TPS stands for Temporary Protected Status. And it's a status that's given on a limited, I think it's a 2 to 3 year period that can be renewed for people coming from distress situations. They're not looking to necessarily immigrate to the United States, they're looking for relief, they're looking for escape. And so it's only given, it's given country by country when there's a real disaster someplace. Like in Haiti, it's first started with the earthquake there. Trying to think of other TPS spots, none are coming up right now, but when we were working with students, every once in a while we'd have students coming on temporary protected status. It's a short-term thing. It allows them the ability to stay here and to work for a living, but it's 2 to 3 years. And unless that it's not an individual thing, it's a countrywide thing. So unless the government extends TPS for Haiti for another 3 years or whatever, then they get to that end of the time and you got to go home or you're not here legally. You're undocumented at that point, okay? Humanitarian parole may be a thing you've heard, or maybe not. It's a horrible term, isn't it? We usually equate parole with getting out of prison. Humanitarian parole is a condition that many from Afghanistan came here on, where they were just getting the heck out of Dodge, you know. They had to have someplace to go. You saw the pictures on TV of people hanging onto the planes and rushing the airport, and desperate to get out of there at a moment's notice. And so they were given humanitarian parole, which is a little bit different than temporary protected status. It's an individual thing, not a country thing. And it can be renewed, and it can give a pathway to asylum, which is a way to stay more semi-permanently at that point. Okay, so an asylee, similar to a refugee, is a person who is unable or unwilling to return to their home country because of persecution or well-founded fear of persecution due to race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. And again, this is a technical definition given by the United States on what they would give an asylum visa for. So people coming at the southern border, this is what they're applying for. Okay, they don't have a visa to come here. They're getting away from some disaster. It hasn't necessarily been proclaimed to TPS, or it's not so prevalent that it's humanitarian parole, although it sounds like it to me, right? But they come to the border, they want to come in, they're saying, I want asylum. It used to be that you could only get asylum at the border. You had to actually step into the country and say, I want asylum. So that's where you hear stories about people, you know, they sneak across the border and they just start looking for some official somewhere, a police person. They'd wave them over and say, I'm here, I want asylum. And so then there's a whole protocol that has to be followed, or sometimes they're detained while they're going through that process. And it's a legal process. They have to go before an immigration judge. Incredibly backlogged right now, incredibly backlogged. You apply for asylum, you might, in the next 7 years, get a hearing before a judge. Okay? And that's why it became practice to just not offer asylum, start sending people back or detain them, put them in these prisons, really, along the border, to hold them until they got to their asylum hearing. They could be there for years. This is where families were getting separated, children, because they had to be taken care of by Health and Human Services, separated from parents, getting them back together. You know, it was a nightmare, horrible nightmare. One of the darkest stains on our country since slavery, I think, that we did. So those are some definitions we'll have. Okay, so the process of refugees coming, as I said, was controlled by UNHCR, and it began after World War II, because, I mean, the UN only started after World War II, right? And this is where we started to get this more detailed look at migration across countries and trying to control it internationally with specific rules and rights that people had when they migrated. So the UNHCR, people come to a refugee camp someplace and get enrolled there, are able to stay there. They're enrolled in the refugee process. They could be there for their whole life. I've heard stories of people spending over 30 years in a refugee camp and not getting out, not being vetted anyplace. Children born there, grow up there. This is their city, refugee camp. So they vet these, UNHCR vets these to different countries. The United States then has an Office of Refugee Resettlement. And they have designated 9, I think it may be 10 now, agencies that they work with in the United States to help resettle refugees. So they'll get them in from the UNHCR. They'll meet with these 9 agencies in DC, and they will say, okay, we'll take these, we'll take these, we'll take these, whatever, maybe a certain nationality is in their area, we know we can take that, and they'll fit in as, they'll do that, okay? So those agencies were listed here. Catholic Charities, the big one in Kansas City, that has really jurisdiction over our area, so we worked a lot with Catholic Charities on this. International Rescue Committees in Wichita, Church World Services, which I know Presbyterian Church is a part of Church World Services. Very large group that does this, and we're actually working with them on the process we're working on now. I'll tell you in a minute. Episcopal Migrant Ministries, I told you about. Lutheran Immigration Refugee Services one. There's others, some bigger, some smaller. Okay, so that's the process. The custom is that the President of the United States each year will set a limit for how many refugees we can take in every year, and you can see the chart here. So you see that when this chart started in 1980, it was a pretty high limit, right? We're talking over 220, but probably 230,000 was the limit that they would take. Well, if you remember what was happening in the late 70s, early 80s, and you can see how it drops off precipitously after that. So that was the end of an era. Do you remember what was happening with refugees at that time? Vietnam, yeah. There were so many people escaping Vietnam, and the United States took in hundreds of thousands of them, okay? And that's where that was happening. You can see that the orange line there is how many we actually took in that year, and the orange line always runs, there's a couple of times where it touches the blue line, but it's always less than the limit, right? We always bring in less. But you see what happened over here in the late teens, okay, 2017, right? We had a different administration. And the limits went down to the lowest they've ever been. And in 2020, 2021, see, from 2020 to 2021, it went up, and then in 2022 up higher, and it stayed at that limit the last 3 years. And that limit is about 124,000 is what the limit has been. We haven't gotten close to that number. During the Trump era, the entire refugee mechanism was just destroyed, okay? The limits were low. The actual coming in was even lower. These agencies that were doing all the distribution of refugees around the country, they are dependent upon refugees coming in. That's how they get their money. The government gives them so much money per person to do this process. Well, if there's nobody coming in, they're not getting the money. So they had to lay off staff. COVID, hit. They had even worse situations where they couldn't have real personal communication with people, and they just were decimated. So when the number went back up, there were no way they were prepared. They are still in a very fast hiring process to get the number of caseworkers they need to help with this process, the number of administrators they need just to do the paperwork of it all. So it's really been a hard situation. Because of that, the Biden administration just a year ago, well, January of 23, year and a half ago now, more, created a program called Welcome Corps. Get into that next. Oh, okay. Let me back up. So during that time, we had these events happening, right? So agencies were decimated, didn't have people, couldn't meet the need. Afghanistan fell in 2021. The Ukraine war in 2022, right? Crisis at the border, which was kind of a crisis, before we started making a lot of noise about it and saying we wanted to build a wall. But after the Biden administration was elected, and he decided to do away with most of those restrictions, it became a real crisis, and that's what you see on the news now. It is a crisis down there. There are hundreds of thousands of people at the border waiting to get in, and it's been, it hasn't been managed well, but actually I'm not sure how it could have been managed well. It was a crisis that was happening. Okay, so those things were happening. Okay, so now they created a new way to help private sponsorship. Private groups could sponsor and resettle refugees. Didn't have to go through that process through the UN or through these agencies that were so overwhelmed, that we could get more people in to meet that 124,000 need. And so that's when we created AIR, to be a group that could help coordinate that in Lawrence and could raise money to help do that. Groups of at least 5 people would need to organize. They don't have to all be refugees. Remember our definitions. They could be from Afghanistan coming on humanitarian parole. They could be people seeking asylum in the United States. There are all these categories that could be done, so it expanded the number. We are currently in process of sponsoring a family from Afghanistan that one of our members knew, one of the people from AIR that it's kind of why we organized. She had done several Fulbright commissions in Afghanistan, gotten to know a lot of people, and there was a family of journalists, right? And his family who were stuck in Afghanistan trying to get out. He was targeted by the Taliban. He was a journalist. He's persona non grata now, right? So he's been hiding out for 3 years, just waiting for the knock on the door. Hopefully in the next couple of months, we will have that family here. We're in that process and getting down to the home stretch. Also, we heard that there was a process, that there's this big waiting line of people, many from Venezuela, but many other places that are seeking to come in, just needing placement. And so we said, well, let's start talking with some of our member groups, our churches and other organizations that we're a member of, that they could meet this criteria, right? You get 5 people together, raise a little bit of money, you could sponsor somebody. And so I was been speaking to a number of churches. I'm speaking to you this morning, if you guys want to get on this thing. My church, the Trinity Episcopal Church, just last month, yeah, agreed to do this thing. And we just put the word out. I need 5 people that will be willing to put their names on the document saying, we're going to do this. And at that time, and this program ended in the end of last month, the end of August, you didn't have to raise the money. If you got your application in before the end of August, they had a grant that would give you the money for 3 months, right? I don't have it there. I think it's the next slide. Why don't you get that one? Yeah. So $2,475 per person that you're supporting, okay, is what it takes for 3 months. I'll tell you up front, that's the minimum of what it's going to take. Okay, you can just think of what it costs to live for 3 months, what your budget looks like for 3 months. It's probably more than that, but it can be in-kind service as well. We have been collecting furniture for over a year. We've got a whole storage unit full of furniture that we can help groups to get that facility going. It's finding housing, it's helping them get enrolled in school, doing healthcare, transportation, teaching them about transportation, how do you get around the city, or helping them find transportation if they can drive a car. how they can get a car. Sometimes language acquisition is needed. They don't have any English. Job training, all those kinds of things. And it's not going to happen in 3 months, but that's your commitment time is 3 months. The truth is, just like it's not going to cost $24.75 per person, you should be ready to sign up for a lifetime of commitment on this, right? Hopefully they stay here and they become great friends and they get involved in your congregation, and it's not as intense after they've been here a few years as it is the first few months, that kind of thing. But this is the process that we're talking about. Let's see what the next slide shows us. Okay. So, even if you didn't, as a church, want to take that on to say we're going to support a family or a person, AIR is raising the money to help support these 2 families, at least, and to keep them going. We have several, like I told you, we've got lots of furniture saved up, but we're probably going to need more as families come in. And then with those different ideas, if you'd want to volunteer to just help somebody learn the transportation system in Lawrence, or how do you get enrolled in school, or getting to their health care at the doctor, whatever, helping them get around town, taking them shopping and teaching them what a supermarket is like and how you navigate that, okay? It's amazing. We take that for granted, but it's like overwhelming for people coming here from other countries that are used to shopping in small little neighborhood markets. The amount of choice we have, it paralyzes them. So those are some things there. Do I have anything left on this? Okay, let me talk to you a bit about the southern border, and then I'll leave it open for questions. So we have refugees coming through these different processes, and we have the situation at the southern border, and in many ways it's kind of 2 sides of the same coin. People are fleeing disaster, fleeing for their lives. And as I was talking to Paul here earlier, the thing I have to keep in mind is that nobody wants to leave home. And think about that. Nobody wants. Would you want to leave home? Would you just say, I think there's a better opportunity for me in another country. I'm leaving everything I've got behind. You might, if it was a good opportunity and if you had the resource to do it. These are people coming with no resource. They are fleeing for their lives. If the situation at home was better, and they are being targeted by gangs, drug lords, political persecution if they don't agree. Look what's happening in Venezuela right now, right? You don't agree, you're either thrown in jail or you better get the heck out of here. So the kinds of freedoms we have in the United States that we take for granted are really not prevalent in many places in the world. And it's not just the United States. This is a global issue. You can read about this in the paper every day about what's happening throughout Europe. And while there was initially a real welcoming in some countries of people fleeing, particularly from Africa, but also from the Middle East into Europe, that's not the situation right now. There's a real resistance to new people coming in. One thing I'd like to talk about is that why are so many people piled up at the southern border? And just, again, it's not your father's immigration situation at the southern border. When I grew up, there was always this discussion about people from Mexico coming in, right, to work, coming in illegally and working. I grew up in California, so there were a lot of people, a lot of farm workers coming in, Central California, to work there. Weren't necessarily documented. They would come in, they would work the season, the harvest season, they would go home with their money, and they would come in again the next year. You know, they had kind of a pathway that they could get in, and they would get back and forth. It was how they made their living. And there, a work visa would have been a great answer, but we didn't have it. That's not the situation right now, okay? There are people from many, many, many countries. I can't give you a number at the southern border. They are not, definitely not all Mexicans. A minority of them are Mexicans. They're coming from all through Latin America, particularly Central America. They are coming from Haiti, certainly, Africa, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, a lot of people at the southern border. Even from India, from China, from many places you wouldn't imagine. They're coming to the southern border because it's the way to get in. Now, why? Well, it's kind of the way to get in. It's not that easy anymore, but they're not being told. They're being told it's really easy now, right? And so people, the smugglers, are getting them up there, and it's just a backlog of hundreds of thousands of people, literally. Why are they coming to the United States? Do anybody want to answer that question? Hmm?
So they don't get killed or raped.
Okay, okay. Yeah, it seems like a safe place, right? It's supposed to be a welcoming place. They may have relatives here. There's perceived opportunity here. It's a land of opportunity, right? It's all those propaganda things that we've put out there about what a wonderful, great country we are. People are believing it, and they're coming. And we are a great country, right? And they're coming here. And I keep telling people, why are we afraid of this? This is a great credibility to us, really. People want to come to the United States. Let's figure out a way that we can help facilitate this in a legal manner that makes everybody happy. And we could. We certainly have the resource to do that if we just want to. But there's that fear factor. There's the propaganda in the news that people are coming in caravans to take over the country, to take your jobs. That's not what they're coming for. They're coming for jobs that people don't want. You look at the situation in Springfield, okay? It's a city that's grown by more than 20% in the last, 5 years or something? The Haitians are in Springfield now because there were jobs that were not being filled. Springfield did not have enough people for all those manufacturing jobs. And if they didn't have all the Haitians there working those jobs, Springfield would be in a very bad place. They would economically be run down. They probably wouldn't have not just the 20%, it probably would be half of what they used to be. It'd be a shrinking situation. My grandfather came from Italy in the early 1900s as an immigrant. When he came, he rode on a boat to Ellis Island, right? You know what he had to do to get in? Show up. Get off the boat, go through all the little stations they had. Welcome to the United States. That's what the situation was then. After World War II, it's become much more difficult. You have to have a visa. You have to have a reason to come. You have to have all these pieces. Okay. This is a country of immigrants, and we couldn't exist without immigrants. When my grandfather came from Italy, he was, of a lower class. He was a despised individual. He had to really scrape to get a job. He wound up in San Francisco. He went all the way from New York to San Francisco and worked in the truck garden. That's always been the case with people coming as immigrants. And they've always been kind of looked down upon, again, because they're different than us. They're different. And difference is a real fear factor. Okay. The asylum cutoff, and I want to stop here and give you a chance for questions. The asylum cutoff, you've heard a lot in the news regarding the new regulations the Biden administration has put in to end asylum or to even shut down the border when they need to, which maybe that's not such a bad thing. It sends a clear message to the smugglers that can be countered that, it's not a free pass in. People are just camping out on the border now and not getting in. The asylum cutoff is a difficult thing because asylum is really It's in our immigration rule that we should offer asylum to those who come and qualify. But it's such an underfunded situation now. We don't have enough immigration judges. We don't have enough administrators of the Homeland Security departments that, like I said, you could wait 7 years waiting for your asylum. So here's the situation. People come across, they happen to be one of the lucky ones to say, okay, you qualify for asylum, come on in, we'll sign you up, here's your next court date, go to wherever you're gonna go and show up at this date at this time. They could be here for 7 years with their family. They've established themselves. They're working in the community. Their kids are going to school, making friends, doing all that. 7 years, they go to their asylum date. And do you know what the approval rate in asylum court is? 10%, less than 10% actually will get asylum after you've been here and established yourself.
What's that last sentence again, a little louder?
I'm sorry?
The thing about 10%.
The approval rate of asylum, once you get to your court date 7 years from now, is less than 10%. So you've been here for 10 years, you've established yourself, you've make your living, you're paying your taxes, your kids are in school, and now you got to go back home. You know, it's just a criminal situation that we're facing. So more funding for these kinds of things is what's needed, not limitations on it. I'll stop there and open you up for questions. Yes?
Why are they turning them down?
I don't know. There are certain criteria they have to meet, okay? Sometimes it's, as I've heard, as simple as having too many parking tickets. You know, you've been violating the law. So they're looking for any opportunity to say no, is the thing, because the mindset is we can't just have this open door. We can't just have people coming in. Yeah.
Are there groups that you know about, that you've spoken to, who say, we would love to do something, we cannot do it ourselves?
Yeah.
That we could partner with?
Yeah. And that's part of what AIR, our group, is about, is helping to coordinate those things. So for instance, there's a group from the Jewish Community Center that reached out to us and said, well, is this something we can do? And once they heard the criteria, they said, I don't think we can handle that. We said, well, Trinity is doing it. Do you want to just join in with Trinity, you know? Or, you know, the Presbyterian Church is thinking they could do it, but they don't have enough resource, and maybe another church, and, you know, we can pull some groups together to help make it more manageable. Yeah. But that's one function that we can do, is connect those groups. Yeah.
As you look around the world, is Canada doing it better?
Canada has had a program like this Welcome Corps for a long time, where they've allowed for private sponsorship. And it has worked really well for them. They're not seeing nearly the numbers that the United States is, as people wanting to come in. Just people don't know Canada, you know, it's just not as popular. Yeah, but they have been able to make it work with this kind of private sponsorship program. Anything else? Okay. Yeah.
Question. Okay, so these folks who've settled here, what is the process for getting another permanent residency or another asylum? Do they file for permanent residency after 2, 7, 10 years?
Yeah, I know for those who come in refugee status, they have to wait 1 year before they can file for residency. And I just have a friend from the Democratic Republic of Congo wrote me this week, said, I'm going to Kansas City to get my resident card, and I know he filed a year ago, January. So that process is actually fairly quick for him to get to that. But his refugee status, he was able to work and exist and everything, but now he has green card is what it's called, but it's not green. But he has, you know, he can stay here for his life if he wants to. Can't vote. That's about the only limitation you have on residency. but he has the ability to file for citizenship then. I have another friend from Eritrea who got citizenship about a year ago. Yeah.
That's 10% of those who apply get the status of residency.
No, no.
10%.
Yeah, that's if you're coming in for asylum. Yeah.
10%.
Yeah, about actually get it after they've been here for several years. Yeah, yeah. But if you're coming in refugee status and you move to residency, and asylees can move to residency after, I'm not sure, it may be after they've been here a year. I'm thinking it's 18 to 24 months they can apply for residency after they've gotten asylum, but they've had to wait all these years to get asylum. There are some situations where they can actually move right to residency. I'm not sure how that works, and it's pretty technical. Yeah.
Social services such as Medicaid, food assistance, rent assistance, those things, do you have to be a citizen?
No.
Or can you be a refugee?
Yeah. Refugees get Medicaid. Yeah. I'm not sure if there's a limit on it or not. The ones I know have, gotten jobs, and so they're starting to get insurance through their jobs, and so then the Medicaid drops off. Refugees can apply for things like aid, public aid on things. Although, so the ones we would be sponsoring, we would be responsible for the first 3 months. They couldn't apply for anything for those 3 months. We have to cover everything. And then after that, they can do that. For asylees, I'm not sure how it works on what they're eligible for. They don't get Medicaid, at least not immediately.
Was it
Yeah.
2475? Was that what it was per person?
Mhm.
That includes, and you're signing them up on the Affordable Care Act type of insurance. You're paying for insurance. You're not paying for open whatever the health care needs are. Right?
Right, yeah. Yeah, like I said, that's a minimal number. You're probably going to wind up supporting them for more than that, because that could be just rent. You know what I mean? Yeah, depending on how many kids they've got and how big of a place they need. Yeah. Yes.
You have a slide or contact information that you easily distribute for your organization, or how do you find it?
You know what? I meant to do that. I meant to have a slide with that. Yeah, right. Yeah. But I can get that to you. I'm not sure which is the best way to distribute it, but we're getting our website up. I can get it to Paul. Maybe he can get it out to people. We're getting our website up now, and so it's not up yet. We do have an email for the sponsorship group. Some of you may be on our email from, I think I noticed a couple of names of some of you.
Yeah, your most recent email that I had talked about an Afghanistan woman who came up, who's here now at KU, and she got here just before the Taliban did their death.
Right.
She wants to get her sister over here, and so you were appealing for money to get the
sister. She has a GoFundMe account to get her, and her sister is here, but has a limited scholarship. She's here studying at KU, wants to be a surgeon. I can't remember what kind of surgeon. Anyway, so yeah, so you're on our list. So Lirum has a mailing list of just things we have coming up, and it's LIRI ministry@gmail.com. The AIR group, which is doing the sponsorship of refugees, has an email that is AI Refugees Lawrence at Gmail. Yeah.
You get sponsorship from companies like Berry Plastic or Kmart, or is Kansas Workforce, do they communicate with you? They help?
We haven't made a contact with the Kansas Workforce yet. We do have a good relationship with Berry, mostly as an employer. getting jobs for people because they're hiring all the time. And they're very refugee friendly out there. They have a real philosophy of hiring refugees and even training their supervisors in intercultural communication to know how do you work with people from other countries and understand those differences and that kind of a thing. Yeah. Yeah, Paul.
The recent bipartisan immigration reform bill that failed.
Yeah.
Had it passed, would that have helped?
No, it's a real restriction on asylum. Yeah. Yeah, I don't, you know, it would have helped in that it would have taken, you know, Trump's fear. It would have taken the immigration piece off the table for the election because it would have given them everything they wanted in it, and they voted against it because no, they don't want to solve immigration. They want to use it as a political point to run on.
My understanding is that it had money for not only border agents and better protection about stopping illegal people from coming in, but also that there would be what do you call it, the asylum, the people that check them out, and you know the people who say you're going to go into detention or no, or whatever.
Yeah.
Lawyers and social workers and all that.
Yeah, yeah. It would have given more funding for the whole asylum process, which would have been good. It would have provided for more judges, more administration to help facilitate the asylum process faster, and that would have been a good point of it. So there were some good things and some bad things, but overall, I thought this is, yeah, it's not going to help the situation. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, and thanks for your interest in the cause. And I'm sorry I didn't have all that stuff written out for you, but I'll get it to Paul. He can distribute it. If you would like to, as a church, just organize or even just meet, I'd be willing to meet with you and talk through what the process is, or if we want to connect with another group of people that may be considering it as well, I'd be happy to facilitate that for you. Yeah.
I've been part of the congregation, and I know other people have been part of the congregation back when it was the Vietnamese. That when we took in a family, the whole church really had a focus and enthusiastic about it, so revitalizing of the congregation.
Yeah, yeah, right. And that's what it would be wonderful, you know, for that there'd be a whole community of people to come around them and do that. So thank you. Thanks for hearing me, and thanks for